Happy May, everybody. May 1st here. Welcome in tonight. I'm Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich for Live Weather Impact on this Friday, May the 1st, 2026. Now that April is in the books, we can look back at what April was like this year. And if you thought it was warm and dry, you'd be exactly right. It was incredibly warm. It was incredibly dry. What's crazy is it was the second warmest April on record. The first warmest was last April. So 2 years in a row, we've had crazy warm Aprils. And as you would suspect, it was incredibly dry. But not the driest. The fifth driest, just under an inch of rain, 8/10 basically, 8300ths depending on how you want to look at it, which is kind of crazy to think about because typically April is a pretty wet month, so that's really dry by April standards. But for the year, it has been incredibly dry. You go back to the beginning of January through the end of April, that's the driest start to the year on record. So it is really, really dry. And those previous years, we were in drought too. And this is the problem. We're in a drought going into the year, but this time of year, it's growing season, it's spring, things are growing, we're using a lot of water, so it's making the drought a lot worse. We saw mandatory water restrictions go into effect today. We'll talk with Tim about that. But this is really where the drought got its start back in the fall. It's really been this spring, though, that things have gotten worse because it's spring, and it's actually the biggest rainfall deficits we've had has been the month of April, 3 inches below average just for April. That doesn't count all the deficit going back to the beginning of the year or even last year. In the last 12 months, we've only had 1 month with above average rainfall, and that was last August. And that's the last time we were not in drought because at the end of September, early October, that's when we first got into the drought. But there's some good news, bad news situation here. We've got rain on the way. That's the good news. Bad news, it's not a lot of rain because when you see this rain along the Gulf Coast, pretty nice setup actually for heavy rain there. The problem is this is all moving mainly due east. Doesn't have enough of a northerly component to bring a ton of rain into the Piedmont of North Carolina. So this is primarily going to be a coastal event. It's a cool day today. Today was the coolest day we've seen in a while. Tomorrow might be the coolest day we've seen in maybe 2 months. That twofold tells you how cold tomorrow is, but also how warm April was. The coolest daytime high in April this year was 61 degrees back on the 8th. It's a chance we could stay below that tomorrow. Part of the reason we're not going to see a lot of rain and it's going to be cool, dry air. Look how dry the dew points are, 20s, 30s, and 40s. So as the rain moves in, a lot of it's going to evaporate. That's going to cause the temperature to fall. It's also going to use up some of the moisture because it's going to be evaporating. So you see our rain chances here. They really ramp up after 2 in the morning. And then tomorrow morning is when the heaviest, let's just say highest rain chances because I don't think it's going to be incredibly heavy. I'll get to that in a minute. Overnight, low 50s, so really cool. Very chilly. In fact, tomorrow we'll struggle to get out of the 50s for highs where the rain falls. Where there's sun and less rain to the north, that's why you're seeing 60s up against the foothills because there might be little to no rain there and actually a pretty dry weekend all in all. So let's look at the future cast. Here's what it should look like by 4 o'clock in the morning. Notice we've got some rain around, but it's incredibly light rain, heavier to the south. Rain is light on and off through the morning. By mid to late morning, look what happens. The rain actually moves out. So by lunchtime, we actually could be completely dry. So if you have outdoor activities tomorrow, definitely want to have some shelter, a jacket in the morning. You want that jacket in the afternoon, but the afternoon actually looks pretty good as that dry air moves back in. You see by 4 p.m., we actually see maybe the sun. I'm not going to say where I'm 100% confident sun is out, but definitely drier air will be moving into the region. So certainly a cooler setup tomorrow with highs only in the 50s and 60s. Now, there could be a little sprinkle on the back side of that low, but by Sunday morning, very chilly. Down in the low 40s. There's going to be a touch of frost in some areas early Sunday morning. That's how chilly it's going to be. And then we go into Sunday, and it's a beautiful day. Upper 60s, near 70, lots of sunshine. Really is a great day. And then Monday, we'll start the day dry, maybe a few clouds. There is a front that tries to move in, but it should stay to our north, and we warm back up close to 80. So here's the bad news. It's going to rain, but it's not a lot. And here's what I'm talking about. Let's go through our future cast. Now, again, when you look at these, this is model guidance that we use. That exact amount is not what's going to fall. It just gives you a range of possibilities. But you see generally 1/10 of an inch across the Charlotte area to maybe a 1/2 an inch south. I think that's probably a good spread. So somewhere south of 85, 1/10 to a 1/2 an inch. 1/2 an inch would be the winners. tenth of an inch would not be bad, but some areas north, as you can see, there will be some zeros, or little to no rain, or trace amounts, meaning it's sprinkled but wasn't enough to measure. So not the greatest amount. That is not going to do much for the drought. And just to put this perspective, that 0.13 for Charlotte, that's actually the normal rainfall for a single day. So we might get normal rainfall, but that's about it. And remember, we need above normal for days and weeks and months. That's really the only way to get out of this. But there are other rain chances ahead, not many. Next Thursday, probably a decent chance for scattered showers and storms with a cold front. That cold front hopefully will bring us at least the potential for more rainfall, because when you look at the 7-day rainfall forecast, a couple things stick out across the southeast. You see a bunch of rain in this area to our south, but not much up into the Piedmont of the Carolinas, though it is better. I mean, this is the first time in a while we don't have zero, and we have amounts that are approaching 3/4 of an inch to maybe an inch of rain. That's certainly a step in the right direction. It's still below average. We need an inch of rain per week, 1 inch per week. And right now, it just does not look like we're going to see a lot of that over the next 7 days. So I'd love to see this total go up a lot more than what we're seeing right now. But when we look at the long range, it just does not look like it's going to be a ton of rain, at least in the foreseeable future, but it stays pretty cool. So the one good thing about cooler temperatures, the evaporation rates are lower, there's less stress on plants, and with water restrictions going into effect, people use less water when it's cool because obviously they're not trying to cool things. Your plants aren't soaking it up as quickly. So actually could end up being a decent thing that we're cooler. So your weekend forecast, wet and cool for the first half of tomorrow. Sunday, definitely a beautiful day, mostly sunny, highs near 70. Here's a look at your Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast. Look at those temperatures back in the 70s and 80s. Pretty dry next week outside of the rain chance on Thursday. Of course, the Truist is in town next week. We'll keep a close eye on that. We'll talk about the extended forecast coming up in a couple of minutes, but stick around. We'll be right back.
Weather Impact Live with Brad Panovich is sponsored by Moisture Lock, crawl space, basement, and foundation repair experts serving the Carolinas since 1988.
Tired of all this rain? Does your yard look like a swamp after it rains? Hi, I'm Greg Doggett with Moisture Lock, Charlotte's premier waterproofing and foundation repair company. The longer water sits, the softer soil will become. This can cause foundation issues. If you're having drainage issues, contact Moisture Lock. We'll get the water away from your home and out of your yard.
Moisture Lock, stabilize, enhance, protect.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Tim Buckley joins me as always, and hard to believe it's already May. And we're talking about the drought continuing. Tim, we had kind of a big story today in Charlotte. Not that it's shocking, but Charlotte Water is going to institute mandatory water restrictions for Charlotte Water starting May 15th. So kind of a big deal because we're one of the biggest water users in the state, obviously. That's the biggest system, and it's coming out of the Catawba River chain. And we're not the only ones. Gaston County, a lot of places along there. There's a drought advisory board along the Catawba River chain. They get together at every Friday, and they kind of institute these. And so that was kind of a big deal. First mandatory restriction since 2009 in the city of Charlotte.
Wow. Pretty long time. And I saw that. First thing I did was texted my buddy who works for the city of Greensboro. I said, all right, what are we doing?
And
he said, we're monitoring the situation.
Yeah.
But we're a little bit, I guess, in better shape than some for one reason or another, trying to figure out exactly why. But they're still watching and waiting as far as that goes. But this is going to come for everybody eventually if we don't get enough rainfall. I am curious, Brad, as you probably know the reason waiting the 2 weeks. Why is it? To let people kind of prepare and maybe get more educated about what a mandatory restriction means? Is that kind of the thinking?
So we asked that question today, and I initially thought what you thought. It was like, to give people 2 weeks to kind of get ready for it and not just throw it on them. But Charlotte Water actually said that based on their criteria, they do have plenty of supply for the next 2 weeks. And like the 15th was kind of the time period where they considered that the water level would be low enough. So it's kind of a preemptive thing. They think the 15th is when they'll have issues. They also said something very curious, and we talked a lot about this, that they were talking about the last time they did this, that they normally haven't had water restrictions in the spring. It's typically something they start doing in the summer. Even in our past droughts, the mandatory restrictions have been primarily summertime. They didn't even do it during the spring last time because typically we don't have as bad a situation. So I thought that was interesting. And just for folks to know, it sounds horrible when you say mandatory restrictions. You can still water. You just can only do it at certain times. You can hand water your garden anytime. You can use soaker hoses, drip irrigation. But if you use irrigation for your lawn or sprinklers, you got to do it 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. on Tuesdays and Saturdays for odd numbered addresses, and even number Wednesday, Sunday. You can top off your pool on Thursdays and Sundays between 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., but you're not allowed to fill residential pools. So that means you could just top it off. You can't wash your car at home. You can't operate non-aquatic water features. And what does that mean? So if you have a koi pond, you can maintain it because it's got aquatic life. If it's just a fountain, you can't maintain it. Like even fountains in the city, they're going to shut down, Tim. You can't power wash anything that's non-essential. So that's going to affect a lot of businesses, actually. And no charity fundraising car washes, which as a kid, all the high schools do those fun car washes. They can't do those. So so some interesting restrictions. Some of them I think are more. I think the power washing one might be the big one because I know a lot of friends that's their business. Power washing decks, homes. So restricting that's a pretty big deal for some businesses.
Wow, yeah, I hadn't thought about that impact, and that's going to be a big, hopefully, I don't know, hopefully they have some other outlet. A lot of times they do multiple things, whether it be, cleaning the gutters and doing pressure washing or one thing or the other, but either way, that's going to cut a lot of business out. You mentioned the washing the car at home. I think it's a good point that the commercial car washes, like you were saying before, recycle a lot of that water. So that's why they're still allowed to kind of keep on doing their thing, and it's a little bit more efficient to do it at a business rather than in your driveway where it all just runs into the road.
Yeah, and it really is. This is like non-essential. And for everybody out there, this does apply to businesses. Anybody that's a customer of Charlotte Water has to abide by these. But commercial businesses that use water for baking or, there's been a lot of data center talks, it doesn't affect that part yet. It could, because this is only stage 2, Tim. There's actually a higher stage than this where they could restrict your indoor water use. Right now, this is mostly outdoor stuff that is just non-essential. So, businesses can't water their lawns. They can't do stuff outside. So they have the same type of restrictions. But if you're a restaurant, you can still use water inside. If you're a resident, you can take long showers. Not that I advise that, but you can still use water normally inside. This is more the spring, summer stuff that people do outside that ends up wasting a lot of water, basically.
Yeah, and really, being a little preemptive, hopefully, just to, noticing that this is going to be a long-term problem and a long-term trend. Cutting back a little bit now is going to help you in the long run, hopefully, if this thing continues a long time. But raising the awareness is good. I remember years ago when California had their horrible drought that lasted a couple of years, I guess it was. I was out there on a trip, and the restaurants, they wouldn't give you water. If you wanted water, you could buy a bottle of water, but that was about it. So all of that was just kind of an awareness, because California kind of looks brown to you when you're a tourist anyway. Yeah. But that was kind of our noticing of, they're really super short on water, and that was kind of what kind of made it ring true in our mind, just eating dinner.
Yeah, we're not to that point yet. So, I guess the bad news is it could get worse, Tim, right? There's other restrictions that could come. I could see that at some point. I think I remember when I first got here, I don't think the 2007, 8, 9 drought they did this, but the drought that was going on for 4 years when I arrived in 2003, there were business affected, like certain days of the week, certain businesses weren't allowed to use water. I remember the golf courses got hit really hard, and a lot of the golf courses changed because of that. They changed the type of grass they grew. They had significant water restrictions. They weren't allowed to water the course at all, and that's why a lot of courses either dug wells, got their own water, or they went to a variety of drought-resistant grass that required less water. And really, since then, every course in Charlotte has some kind of Bermuda hybrid now instead of the bent grass, which, believe it or not, that's a northern grass that was grown down here quite a bit, but it takes a lot of water to maintain that. They all went away from that because of that drought.
Yeah, around here you talk to a bunch of the locals. We remember 2007, 2008, but a lot of people reference that 2002 drought as being a little more on the scary side in terms of the really low lake levels and all of those things. So we've had some bad ones, as we've talked about every day. It's just been a long time. So first time, long time that we're in this mode yet again.
Yeah, so speaking of the drought, and people are going to be sick of it, but it is the biggest weather story going on in the Carolinas, let's be honest. But we do have rain on the way, Tim, and this is kind of the good news, bad news situation. I'm never going to get mad that there's rain on the way, but it's also kind of disappointing that this doesn't look like it's going to be a whole lot, especially because it has promise for some folks to get big time rain, just not for us. So we talked about this the last couple of days. We saw a trend, kind of this hugging the coast and this tight gradient. It really does look like this is going to be really light for most of us, but somebody could get a half an inch. I think that's my ceiling for somebody in my area. I think most folks will be less than a quarter inch and probably a tenth of an inch for a chunk. And there could be a bunch of people with zero, Tim. I think that's the one thing. There's going to be people that get no rain Saturday.
Yep, I think so. And, there are going to be some big winners in the southeast, probably Alabama and Georgia and coastal South Carolina. Those are areas that need rain just as badly as we do, some of them more so. So good news for them. But this is a local weather show, and we talk about local impacts. I agree with you. I think mostly we're going to be missing the party a little bit around here. And especially, it's weird how this sets up sometimes, but you could use I-85 as a border if you'd like to. South and east of 85, better rain chances. North and west of it, you're probably not really getting a drop of rain out of this thing, especially the foothills and the mountains. There's nothing going that far inland. And if you're in the Triad, we're going to really be riding that edge. Charlotte, a little bit closer to some of the rainfall, but it's not looking great. It's really not.
Yeah, and it's going to be a weird day because I think it's going to seem like it's raining more than it is at times because it's going to be drizzly, cloudy. It's going to be incredibly chilly. We kind of saw this today, Tim. We had a few sprinkles in the Sandhills, and temperatures there were in the mid-50s, but where the sun had come out, it was in the 60s. And I'm seeing some of that in the temperatures tomorrow. Not only will there be a tight rainfall gradient, there could be a really tight temperature gradient tomorrow where it's really cold, where it's raining, and then where the sun comes out and the clouds are thinner, it might be in the 60s. Not super warm, but definitely warmer than the 50s in rain.
I think so, too. I think you could go to Mount Airy and have a nice 65-degree afternoon if you'd like to. but in Raleigh, it might be 53. It's
Yeah.
kind of one of those things. I was shocked earlier. Sometimes I'm just kind of hyper-focused, and I loaded up our current temperature map, like you said, this afternoon.
Yeah.
Sanford was 53. I was like, that's a typo. What's going on? And then it made sense when you looked at the radar, and, our dew points are pretty low. And so that's another factor going into tomorrow. Not only can the dew point being low help you cool the air through evaporative cooling, but it could also gobble up some of that moisture. So being on the edge, just because there's rain showing up on the radar, might not necessarily be reaching the ground the whole time either. So there are going to be you're just not going to get a lot of rain. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, look at this right now. Pinehurst is 55 and you're 65.
Right.
So
Isn't that wild?
And that's it. You're right. It's not really raining in Pinehurst. I don't think it's really coming down, but it might be Virga that's evaporating, and it's cloudy there, so that's causing it to stay much cooler where the sun is out and there's not that Virga. It's actually, pretty nice. And we could see this in especially the foothills tomorrow. There could be parts of the foothills that are in the 60s, and then like Monroe, Wadesboro, Albemarle, Asheboro, south could be like in the low to mid 50s, and just a weird day overall. And I don't know what totals you're thinking. I mean, I've been going back and forth. I almost hate to post the totals because I just don't want people's hopes to get up. But, like I said, a tenth to a quarter of an inch in some spots, certainly doable. But it just doesn't. I mean, that's barely our average rainfall. I looked today, our average daily rainfall right now is like, it's 12 hundredths of an inch. So just to have a normal day, you need 12 hundredths. Now, you don't get that every day, but you hope every couple of days you get enough to make up for the dry days. And a 12 hundredth of an inch rainfall isn't going to do a whole lot for us.
Yeah, it's a bummer. I think for most folks in the Triad, a trace to a tenth of an inch is probably what we're looking at. If you're in Asheboro, maybe you pick up a quarter. Raleigh could get a third or a half an inch or something like that. And then Wilmington, they'll be soaked, I would imagine. But I think basically what this map is showing is relatively in the good ballpark. But that's the sweet spot. You want to be I-95 or east. And that's where you're going to get a good soaking, a truly horrific beach day. I mean, brutal.
Yeah.
Just horrible stuff for the first weekend of May. The water temperature had just gotten up to like 68. Can't take advantage of it. Not yet. You got to wait a couple weeks, I think.
Yeah, so let's talk about the temperatures because, we're talking about tomorrow, but tomorrow night into Sunday morning looks really cold. And I think we kind of hinted at this a little bit that, there might be some frost. I'm not going to be shocked if somebody north gets a little bit of frost, maybe up in the foothills. But I haven't seen any. There's some frost and freeze advisories up in the Midwest, but you start looking at some of these lows coming up on Sunday morning, and I mean, 38 in Salisbury, 35 Statesville. I mean, there's a chance. I mean, there's going to be some patchy frost. That is really cold for early May, and the high tomorrow, if we don't get above 61, Tim, that will be the coldest high temperature we've had in Charlotte since March. That means all of April. The coldest April high we had was 61 on the 8th. I had to look. Someone asked me. It was a really good question because I was like, you know what? This probably would be the coldest we've been since March, meaning all of April would have been warmer than what we're going to see tomorrow.
That's a good point. I hadn't looked that up personally. We had a high of 58 on April 8th, it looks like, 58 degrees. So same idea for tomorrow. And you mentioned April. We finished tied in Greensboro for the warmest April on record. So we were tied with 2017 at number 1 for our area.
Wow.
And now you fast forward into May, and we're getting off to the cool start. So a lot of times you can flip that switch sometimes from one extreme to the other is kind of how we're working things out here, it would seem.
Yeah, April's in the book. So, for us, it was the second coldest, or the second warmest, April, which ironically, the first was last year. So 1 and 2 on this list is 2025 and 2026. Rainfall-wise, Tim, for us, it was the fifth, driest. Which is really saying something because April is typically a wet month. So that's a really low number by April. If it was August or September, one of the drier months of the year when we tend to get high pressure, that wouldn't be that crazy. But that's really dry for April. And then for the year, I think this stat is really what tells you how bad the drought is. January 1st through the end of April, it's the driest start to the year on record for Charlotte. Only 6 inches of total rainfall. through basically 4 months of the year. That's just not gonna cut it. That is really, really dry. And the worst deficit for rainfall in a month in the last 12 months, I always like showing this so people could see how extensive the drought is, was actually this April, 3 inches below average. So if people wonder why the drought's become such a big story lately, it really started last fall. But March and April were even worse, and that's the time of year we normally get rain and everything's growing. So
Yeah.
it's really bad time. You're hearing a lot of people talk about that. They don't remember. When we had the state climatologist during our drought show, and he was saying he couldn't remember a drought that was this bad going into the spring. He's like, I remember a lot of droughts getting bad in the heat of the summer or the fall, but rarely do you see it get this bad in the spring when it's, at least normally, you get pop-up storms or some kind of rainfall, and it just hasn't happened this year.
Yeah, it just doesn't fit our climate. Our climate is a showery, wet climate in the spring, as you would expect it to be. And that's just not happened at all. On the flip side of that, we talked about this a little bit the other day. We haven't had severe weather. And hat tip, I saw this on social media. Someone had done this for Alabama, so I looked it up for us.
Yeah.
No tornado warnings in the entire state of
Wow.
North Carolina in the entire month. And also, I did double check too. There were also no tornadoes. That's not
Yep.
always the same stat. There were no tornado warnings and no tornadoes for the entire month. And I had to look up when was the last time that happened. Shockingly, it happened last year too, which really surprised me. But I guess there were none in 2025.
Wow.
But we'll see what happens in May.